You won't believe what my husband made me do. 3 men. One night. What started as a simple joke turned into something that nearly tore us apart. It was a typical Friday night, one where you just want to relax, let go of the week's stress, and enjoy the company of your loved one. My husband and I were lounging at home, sipping wine and chatting about random topics. It was a cozy evening, one that seemed ordinary, until he brought up a topic that completely caught me off guard. He casually asked if I'd ever thought about being with other men. At first, I laughed it off, thinking it was a joke. But then he continued. He wasn't just talking about any men. He was talking about 3 black men. My heart started racing. My mind couldn't process what he was suggesting. Who just comes out and says something like that? I stared at him, waiting for some sign that he was joking. But his expression was serious. I felt a wave of discomfort wash over me. I thought maybe it was just some weird fantasy he'd share and then drop, but he didn't. He kept bringing it up. At first, it was little comments, teasing remarks about what it might be like. Then he started making more direct suggestions. He talked about how it could spice up our relationship, a one-time thing to make things more exciting. I didn't know how to respond. How was I supposed to react to something like that? Was I supposed to say yes? Was this some kind of test? The topic kept creeping back into our conversations. I tried to shut it down, quickly changing the subject or making excuses. But my husband wouldn't let it go. He even started mentioning specific men, friends of his. He said they were cool guys, that nothing had to happen unless I wanted it to, and it would just be for fun. My stomach twisted every time he brought it up, but I didn't know how to tell him how deeply it bothered me. I didn't want to start a fight, but I felt a growing sense of resentment. One night, he went even further. He suggested we meet these 3 men, framing it as a casual hangout with his friends. I hesitated, unsure if this was another attempt to push me into something I wasn't comfortable with. But to keep the peace and not blow up our marriage over what I hoped was just a bad idea, I reluctantly agreed. That evening, we met his friends at a local bar. I felt nervous, like I was walking into a trap. His friends seemed nice enough, polite, charming, maybe a bit too friendly. But there was an awkwardness, an unspoken understanding between them and my husband. It made me sick to my stomach. As the night went on, the drinks flowed, and the conversations got more flirty. I tried to laugh it off, but deep down, I was extremely uncomfortable. One of the men kept giving me lingering looks, and every time I felt his eyes on me, I felt a knot tighten in my chest. My husband, on the other hand, seemed totally relaxed, like he was enjoying watching me get all this attention. He kept smiling at me as if this was some kind of game. Eventually, we all ended up back at our house. I didn't want to, but my husband insisted it would be more chill to hang out at home. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into something I wasn't ready for. Once we were back at the house, the vibe changed. The guys were sitting on the couch, joking around, but there was tension in the air. I was in the kitchen trying to keep busy when one of them came in to help me. I wasn't sure if it was fear, excitement, or both. I felt like I was on the edge of something dangerous. That's when I realized just how deep I'd gotten myself into this situation. I needed to get out of the kitchen, out of the house, out of this entire mess, but I didn't know how. Every time I tried to move, it felt like something was pulling me back, like an invisible weight was keeping me stuck in place. The air in the kitchen felt thick, almost suffocating. I needed to get out of there, but my feet felt glued to the floor. The man standing next to me wasn't backing off, and the way he was looking at me made my skin crawl. He leaned in closer, his breath now against my ear, and whispered something else. This time I heard him clearly. "You look like you want this." That was it. That one sentence snapped me out of my frozen state. I backed away quickly, bumping into the counter behind me. I was trying to put as much space between us as possible without causing a scene. My heart was pounding, and I could feel my face getting hot. A mix of anger and embarrassment. I needed to stop this now, but my mind was racing, and I didn't know what to do. I looked over at the doorway, hoping my husband would walk in, maybe sense that things had gone too far. But he didn't. I realized in that moment that he wasn't going to. He was the one who had put me in this situation in the first place. I was on my own. I pushed past the guy and made my way to the living room, where the other two men were laughing with my husband. They didn't seem to notice the tension or the panic that I was feeling. My husband glanced at me and smiled, completely unaware of the turmoil going on inside me. Or maybe he did know, and he just didn't care. I couldn't tell anymore. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands gripping the cushion so hard that my knuckles turned white. I kept thinking about what had just happened in the kitchen, how close things had come to crossing a line I wasn't ready to cross. I wanted to say something, to tell my husband that this wasn't fun, that this wasn't exciting for me. But I couldn't find the words. The night dragged on, each moment feeling heavier than the last. The men kept drinking, laughing, and my husband continued to play along like everything was normal. But nothing about this was normal. I kept replaying the moment in the kitchen, how close I had come to losing control of the situation. It scared me and made me angry. How could my husband push me into something like this? How could he be so casual about it, as if my feelings didn't matter? Finally, the guys got up to leave. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. I watched as they walked out the door, and for the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe again. But the tension wasn't gone. It was still there, simmering just beneath the surface. After they left, I turned to my husband. He was still smiling, like he had just hosted the perfect night, but I couldn't take it anymore. I had to say something. "What was that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you mean?" he replied, looking genuinely confused. "That," I said, motioning toward the door where his friends had just left. "That whole thing, what were you thinking?" He shrugged, his casual demeanor only making me more furious. "It was just a bit of fun. You didn't have to do anything you didn't want to." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Did he really not understand? "Fun," I said, my voice rising. "You call that fun? You put me in a situation where one of your friends was all over me and you just sat there like it was no big deal." My husband's face changed. The smile dropped, and for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes. But he didn't apologize. Instead, he got defensive. "I thought you were into it," he said. "You didn't say anything. You didn't stop him." That was the last straw. I couldn't hold back anymore. Because I didn't know how. Because I was scared. Do you have any idea how uncomfortable that was for me? How trapped I felt? I thought you were supposed to protect me, not put me in situations like that. The room fell silent. My husband didn't say anything. He just stood there, looking at me as if he didn't know what to do. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he muttered a weak apology, but it didn't feel like enough. That night, I slept in the guest room. I needed space, time to think about what had just happened and what it meant for our relationship. I loved my husband, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. He had pushed me into a situation that I wasn't ready for, and I didn't know if I could forgive him for that. Looking back, I realized that it wasn't just about that night. It was about trust, about feeling safe and respected in a relationship. My husband had crossed a line, and now I had to figure out if I could ever feel comfortable with him again.